There are moments in life you don't realize matter until long after they've passed. It's like the day my neighbor knocked on my door holding a bent-up bicycle and a crooked smile. That was Jake. 3 houses down. 2 years older, a former baseball player with a chipped front tooth and the habit of wearing tank tops in the middle of February. We weren't exactly friends. Not really. It's just neighbors with a polite nod when we passed on trash day, or the occasional wave when he mowed his lawn shirtless and I pretended not to notice. But something changed the afternoon he came by. "Heard you ride a lot," he said, gesturing to the old Trek leaning against my porch. "Think you could teach a guy how not to crash into his own mailbox?" That's how it started. No warning, no prelude. It's just Jake, standing awkwardly in a black tee that clung to his chest and gym shorts that probably hadn't seen a gym in months. I told myself it was nothing. It's just a bored neighbor with a broken bike. But I also noticed the way he scratched the back of his neck when he spoke, how he didn't quite meet my eyes when he asked. I shrugged, trying to act casual. "Sure. When were you thinking?" He grinned. "Now? Started meeting every evening after that? It's nothing formal." Just me adjusting his seat, showing him how to shift gears, reminding him to breathe when he panicked going downhill. The guy was built like a linebacker, but rode like he was trying not to fall off a log. It was endearing in a way I wasn't comfortable admitting, not to him, not even to myself. The first few rides were awkward. He talked too much when he was nervous. Random facts. Questions about my job, his failed attempt at stand-up comedy in college, but he listened when I explained things. Really listened. And every once in a while he'd glance over with this look, like he was trying to figure something out. I told myself it was just gratitude, or maybe curiosity. He probably didn't have many gay friends or any, not in this neighborhood.
Ow.
But it wasn't just that. I caught myself watching him, too. Watching how his calves tensed when he pedaled, how he bit his lip when he focused. I'd adjust his helmet strap and feel the heat coming off his neck. I'd step back too quickly, afraid he might notice how my hands shook just a little. He never mentioned girls, never talked about dates or hookups or any of the things straight. Guys usually drop into casual conversation. But I didn't ask either. It felt safer not to know, to keep the bubble intact. By the 5th ride, he stopped bringing the bike to me. He'd text instead. "You free?" And I always was. Didn't matter what I was doing. I'd drop it. Looking back, I think I knew. It's not exactly what was coming, but that something about the way we moved around each other wasn't normal. Not for friends, not for neighbors. There was something in the space between us, and said, but thick enough to feel. That evening, he offered to drive us to the trail on the edge of town. Thought we could try something different, he said. And for the first time since he showed up with that broken bike, I felt nervous. Not the casual kind. The kind that settles in your chest and taps out a rhythm you can't ignore. The kind that tells you this is the beginning of something. Asterisk, asterisk, Jake's truck smelled like mint gum and old pine-scented air freshener. The kind that tries too hard to cover up something you've stopped noticing. He cranked the windows down and tossed me a water bottle. Trail's 20 minutes out. Ever been to Westfield Loop? I shook my head. Too many joggers. I usually ride solo. Not anymore, he said, glancing over with a grin. You've got me now. It was just a joke. Or maybe it wasn't. With Jake, I was learning that most things sat somewhere between honest and unsure. We rode in silence for a while, the hum of the highway filling the air between us. I stared out the window, catching glimpses of my reflection. My stomach was tight in that way it gets when your body knows something before your mind does. The trail itself was mostly empty, just gravel paths, quiet trees, and the occasional couple walking their dog. I helped him unload the bikes and adjust his seat again, though he probably could have done it himself by now. "You just like touching my seat," he teased. I froze for a second, then laughed it off. "It's crooked, like your balance." Grinned. "Fair." The ride started smooth. He was getting better, still wobbly around sharp turns, but at least he wasn't crashing into bushes anymore. We talked more freely this time, about random things, his job at the auto shop, my freelance graphic work. How neither of us really went out much unless we had to. "You ever think about leaving town?" he asked at one point, slowing down beside me. "All the time," I replied. "But I never do." He nodded like he understood that more than he wanted to admit. Halfway through the loop, we stopped under a shady patch of trees. He laid back in the grass, arms behind his head, chest rising. And falling beneath his t-shirt, I sat beside him, legs crossed, sipping water, and pretending I wasn't memorizing the shape of his jaw. "You ever get tired of being alone?" he asked suddenly, eyes on the sky. I turned to look at him sometimes. "But being alone's better than being with someone who doesn't see you." He was quiet after that. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Then came the moment that stuck with me, even days later. He sat up, brushing grass from his elbows, and reached for my water bottle without asking. I handed it over. Our fingers touched barely, but he didn't move away. Instead, he held my gaze a little too long before taking a sip. It was the kind of look that says nothing out loud, but everything in silence. Later, back at the truck, we loaded up the bikes as the sun began to drop low. The sky turned gold, the kind of light that makes even forgotten parking lots look like they belong in a movie. "You hungry?" he asked casually. "Always," I replied. "Good, there's this diner nearby. Best burgers in town." We sat across from each other in a booth that smelled like old ketchup and melted cheese. He ordered extra pickles. I teased him for it. He stole one of my fries when I wasn't looking. "You know," he said, halfway through his burger, "I haven't hung out with anyone like this in a long time." "Like what?" He shrugged. "Just ... normal. No pressure, no pretending." I wasn't sure what he meant, but I nodded anyway. Outside the diner, we lingered. Neither of us said goodbye right away. He leaned against the truck, looking up at the stars like they might have an answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. "You ever wish things were ... easier?" he murmured. "Yeah," I said. "All the time." We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. But as he drove me home, he played a song I hadn't heard in years, an old acoustic track that made my chest ache with something I couldn't name. "I used to love this one," said quietly. He didn't respond, just turned it up a little, and tapped his fingers against the steering wheel in rhythm. When he pulled into my driveway, he didn't leave right away. He looked over at me, something unreadable in his expression. Then he said, "Same time tomorrow?" I nodded, and as I stepped out of the truck, he added, "You're easy to be around, you know that?" I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Not with the way my throat tightened, but as I shut the door, I smiled. The next few evenings were different. Still familiar, but with a kind of quiet electricity humming beneath every word. Jake would pull into my driveway, honk once, and I'd already be slipping on my shoes. We didn't always ride. Sometimes we just drove down long, empty roads that curled past fields and quiet houses, music low, windows cracked open. It became a routine neither of us acknowledged, but both of us relied on. But tension has a way of blooming in silence, of filling in the blanks between what's said and what's left unsaid. It started one night when his bike chain snapped halfway through a trail. We were miles out, no signal, and the sun was dropping fast. He kicked the gravel, frustrated. I should have checked it. Damn thing's rusted. I tried to laugh. "You just wanted an excuse to walk with me." He looked at me, really looked, and didn't say anything. That silence sat too long between us. We walked the rest of the way back, bikes in hand. It was darker than either of us expected. The air was heavy, warm, and still. Every sound a cricket, a snapping twig, the brush of his sleeve against mine felt exaggerated. "Did I mess up the night?" he asked after a while, breaking the quiet. "No," I said. "It's better this way." We stopped by an old bench on the trail's edge. He sat, wiped sweat from his neck with the hem of his shirt, and sighed. "You ever feel like you're in the middle of something, and you don't know where it's going?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him. The curve of his back, the slope of his shoulders. The way his fingers gripped the edge of the bench like he was holding himself in place. "Yeah," I said softly. "I feel that way all the time." He looked over. "You're different, you know? Not in a bad way. Just ... you see things." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes I wish I didn't." That night, he dropped me off later than usual. We stood at the edge of my driveway, both of us lingering like kids after a party, afraid to be the first to walk away. "You want to come in?" I asked, surprising myself. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to, because he did. "Maybe another time," he said. But the next evening, he texted, "You up for a ride? Or just a drive?" We ended up parked on a hill overlooking a shallow lake just outside town. The bike stayed in the truck bed. He didn't even pretend we came to ride. He leaned his head back against the seat, strumming his fingers on the steering wheel. "You ever wonder if things would be easier if we didn't think so much?" He asked. "Yeah," I replied, "but then we'd just mess up faster." He laughed, a quiet, real laugh that didn't try too hard. Then he looked at me slower this time. His eyes traced my face like he was memorizing it. Different now, not heavy, just full. I said something to break it. "You keep looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're figuring something out." He didn't answer. Just turned away, rolling the window down farther. The next day, everything cracked open. I was fixing the seat on his bike again in my garage when he walked in shirtless sweat, dripping from his neck, hair damp and pushed back. He tossed me a soda, then sat on the edge of my workbench. "Hot as hell out there," he said, wiping his face with the hem of his shirt. I tried not to stare, I really did. But he caught me, just for a second, and he didn't look away. "What?" said, voice low. "Nothing," I murmured. He leaned forward a little. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you think people always know what they want, or do they just do what they're supposed to?" The question hit harder than I expected. "I think most people follow the script," I said.
But
"Some figure out it was never written for them." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately." He stood up, took a step closer, and then paused, barely a foot between us. His chest rose and fell, steady but deep. I felt it again. That pull, that unbearable closeness wrapped in uncertainty. "Jake," I said quietly, "if you're trying to ask me something, I'm not," he said quickly. "I mean, not yet." He walked out a few seconds later, but he left his soda on the bench, still cold, still unopened. Asterisk, asterisk, 3 days passed after he left that soda on my bench. No texts. No knock at my door. Nothing. At first I convinced myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe he got busy. Maybe his phone broke. Maybe he was overthinking like he always did. But the truth sat heavy in my chest like a stone. Something had shifted that day in the garage. I felt it, and so did he. On the 4th day I was coming back from the store, arms full of groceries, keys dangling from my mouth, when I saw him sitting on my porch steps, head down, elbows on his knees, like a teenager waiting for the principal. When he heard my footsteps, he looked up slowly. His eyes were tired, but steady. "Hey," he said softly. I nodded. "Hey." "I owe you an apology," he said. "For what?" "For ghosting." "For ... that weird thing I said." I don't even know what I meant by it. I set the bags down inside the door and came back out, sitting a step above him. "You don't have to apologize," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." He was quiet for a while, then said, "It's just ... I don't know what I'm doing, man. I feel like my brain's telling me one thing and my body's doing another. Like I'm not in sync with myself." I glanced over at him. "You don't have to explain anything to me." "I think I do," he said. He stood and paced for a moment, then sat again, closer this time. "When I was younger," he started, "I used to get this feeling around certain guys, like tight in my chest, but not in a scared way, just ... intense. But I'd push it down every time. Girls were easier to talk about, expected." He ran a hand through his hair. "And then I moved here. I started fresh. Clean break. Got my own place. Quiet life. No pressure. Then I met you." I looked down at my hands. My pulse was thrumming. "You didn't do anything," he added. "You were just ... yourself. Chill. Funny. You looked at me like you saw me." Breath caught in my throat. "And I liked it," he said. I turned to him slow. What do you mean? I liked it. I like you. For a second, everything inside me froze, then melted. I've been trying to pretend it's not happening, he continued. That the way I feel when I'm around you is just ... friendship or gratitude or boredom. But it's not. I couldn't speak. My chest was tight and full at once. I keep thinking about that day in the garage, he said. When I stepped close. I wasn't testing you. I was testing myself, Jake. ... I finally whispered. He shifted closer. We were inches apart. You make me feel safe, he said, but also completely undone. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was. Holding? I'm not asking you for anything, he said. I just couldn't keep it inside anymore. He looked down, hands clenched. The vulnerability in him was so raw it hurt. I don't know what this means for me, he said, but I know how I feel when I'm around you. I don't want that to stop. I reached out slowly and touched his hand. He didn't flinch. He turned it over, palm up, and held mine like he'd been waiting. You're not alone, I said. I've been feeling it too. I just didn't want to ruin anything. Me either, he said. That's why I disappeared. I got scared. We sat like that for a while, just breathing, holding hands like it was the only thing tethering us to the moment. Then he said, Can I ask you something? I nodded. If I kissed you right now, would that be okay? My heart kicked so hard I thought it might crack a rib. Yeah, I whispered. It'd be more than okay. He leaned in slow, like he didn't want to spook either of us. Our foreheads brushed first, then our noses. And then finally his lips found mine. It wasn't like I imagined. It was better, soft, careful, like he was learning the shape of something sacred. When we pulled back, neither of us spoke for a long time. He rested his head on my shoulder. I feel like I just jumped off a cliff, he said quietly. You landed, I replied. He smiled into my hoodie. We didn't go inside right away. After that kiss, time moved differently, slower, quieter. The air around us felt charged, like the world had exhaled, but we were still holding our breath. Jake kept his head on my shoulder, his hand in mine. Every few seconds I felt his thumb move, not nervously, like he was reminding himself I was still there. Finally he whispered, I didn't think it would feel like that, good or bad. I asked, careful not to move. He gave a soft laugh, like home. That word hit deeper than I expected. Home. Not heat or sparks or desire, but comfort, belonging. I tilted my head, resting it against his. You okay? He nodded. I'm scared, but yeah. I think I'm okay. When we stood, he reached for my wrist and held it loosely. Can I stay a while? Of course, we didn't talk much inside. Didn't need to. Kicked off. His shoes, like he'd done it 100 times, walked into the kitchen and poured us both a glass of water. I watched him, leaning against the doorway, heart full and unsure where to put the feeling. He sat on the couch, patting the spot beside him. I joined, careful, aware of every inch between us. After a moment, he reached over and took my hand again, gently as if it were a fragile thing. I keep thinking this is going to crash down, he said, like I'll wake up tomorrow and hate myself. I stayed quiet, let him finish. But I don't, he said. I feel ... lighter. I nodded. It's not wrong to want to be seen. He looked at me, eyes soft, and you see me. Even the parts I don't show anyone that did something to me made my throat tighten. So I smiled and said, yeah, well, your bad bike riding kind of gave it away. He laughed full and unguarded, then leaned into my side. I wrapped my arm around him without thinking. We stayed like that for a while, not making out, not whispering sweet things. Just being there close, in sync for the first time since we met. At one point, tilted his head up toward me, eyes serious. You're not just a phase, he said. Good, I said softly. I'm really bad at being temporary. That night, he didn't sleep over, stood at the doorway for a long time before leaving, like he wanted to, but couldn't. I need to think, he said. Not about how I feel, I know that, but about what this means. For me, for the rest of my life. I walked him to his truck. Before getting in, he turned and kissed me again. Slower this time. Confident. No trembling hands. For permission, I want this, he said. But I also want to do it right. Then he left. I didn't sleep much that night, but I didn't feel alone. The next morning, he sent a photo of his bike, freshly cleaned, fixed chain, tires pumped, ready. When you are? Asterisk, asterisk, he came by the next afternoon, same truck, same half smile, but something about him was different. Lighter, somehow, as if the air around him had finally settled. I met him in the driveway. Neither of us said anything at first. He unloaded. His bike, propped it against the curb, then turned to me. You free to ride? He asked. I nodded. Always. We didn't start from the house. We drove out to the same trail Westfield Loop, where it all started. The trees were fuller now, greener, the path smoother after a recent resurfacing. It looked new. Or maybe we were the ones who'd changed. Jake adjusted his helmet and gave me a look. No laughing when I mess up. No promises. We rode. For a while in silence, not awkward, just easy, side by side, letting the wind move past us. His riding had gotten better, more balanced. More sure? Halfway through the trail, we stopped at that same old bench. He dropped onto it with a huff. Still hate hills. I sat beside him. Still better than crashing into your mailbox. He chuckled, then turned serious. Thinking about what happens next. I didn't say anything, but I felt my body tense. I want to keep seeing you, he said. Not just secretly. Not just at night, for real. I looked at him carefully. That's a big step, I know. You told anyone? He hesitated. Not really, but I will. That's not something I need right now, I said, gently. But it's good to hear. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a silver bike chain link, cleaned and polished. From the old chain, he said, "Duh, one that broke." I turned it over in my fingers. You kept this? Yeah, I figured. It started something. That tiny piece of metal felt like the weight of something honest. A reminder of the night things broke and shifted. Then quietly he said, I'm not going to call myself anything yet. Gay, bi, confused, ... I don't know. But I know how I feel around you. I want more of that. I reached out and held. His hand, he didn't pull away. I'm not going anywhere, I said. We rode the second half of the loop without stopping. This time he led more confident. At the end, when we loaded the bikes back in the truck, he looked at me like he wanted to say something more. Instead, he leaned in and kissed me once, quickly, like it was already a habit. You hungry? He asked. I grinned. Always. Back at my place, we sat on the couch with takeout containers between us. The TV was on, volume low, just for noise. At one point, he leaned into me again, head on my shoulder, just like before. I wrapped my arm around him, pulling him close. And he said the thing I didn't know I needed to hear. You feel like something I never knew I was missing. I didn't respond right away. I just pulled the blanket over us and rested my chin on his head. In that moment, the world didn't feel small anymore. Some things didn't change. Jake still parked his truck a little crooked, still hated hills, still used way too much ketchup on everything. But the way he looked at me, that changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic, didn't start holding my hand in public or kissing me in front of neighbors. But there were moments, small ones, that told me he was leaning in, little by little. Like the time we ran into a mutual friend at the grocery store and the guy joked, "You two are always together these days," and Jake just smiled and said, "Yeah, guess we are." Or the day he started leaving a hoodie in my coat closet, his toothbrush in the bathroom. There was no big talk about it. He just started showing up. ... Never really stopped. One evening, we rode the trail again, the long loop this time, nearly 9 miles. It was warm, golden hour, kind of light filtering through the trees. We didn't talk much, just coasted alongside each other. I could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing, subtle creak of his pedals. At the top of a slow incline, he stopped and put one foot down, looking out over the lake below. I used to ride past this place in high school, he said. Always thought it was just trees and bugs, but now it feels like something else. I nodded. Perspective. He turned to me. You gave me that. Wanted to say something clever or poetic, but all that came out was, you gave it to yourself. He smiled, quiet and soft. Maybe, but you showed me how to stop running from it. We stayed there a while, letting the sun fall lower, and then, slowly, he reached for my hand. Out in the open. No hiding. I looked around. No one was there, but it wasn't about being seen. It was about the fact that he wasn't afraid anymore. He squeezed my fingers and said, I think I'm ready. For what? For whatever this is. Later that week, we had dinner with a couple of his old friends. Nothing formal, just pizza, beer, and a lot of laughter. At one point, one of the guys leaned in and asked Jake, So who's this? Jake glanced at me, then said without flinching, This is someone I really care about. The guy just nodded. Cool. And that was it. No drama, no side eyes. Just ... acceptance. Back at my place that night, we curled up on the couch. His legs tangled with mine, his fingers tracing lazy shapes on my arm. I used to think love had to look a certain way, he said. Like what? Like the movies, the girl, the kiss, the fireworks. But this, he looked at me. This is better, I smiled. You're just saying that because I don't make you watch rom-coms. He laughed and kissed my forehead. That too, before we fell asleep. I asked him the one question I'd been holding back. Are you happy? He didn't hesitate. I'm more myself now than I've ever been. That was all I needed. We didn't talk about labels. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. But we made space for love, for growth, for the idea that sometimes life doesn't follow the map you planned. Sometimes it takes a broken bike and a borrowed evening to find something real. And as we rode side by side the next morning, wheels turning in rhythm, I realized something simple but true. He wasn't just learning to ride, he was learning to stay.